In Indianapolis in the 1990s, multiple gay men disappeared after nights out at various gay bars. The families reported their family members missing, but the police ignored their concerns. They fought for answers. This is when the killer tries to pick up a man who used this as an opportunity to get answers and eventually was the person who did him in. When police finally took this seriously, over 5,000 bones were found at the Fox Hollow Farm, eventually identifying 11 missing gay men in the area. Hello and welcome back to my channel where I deep dive into true crime, paranormal phenomena, cults, and history. Without further ado, let's get into today's case. This is Serial Killer Sunday where I discuss, you guessed it, serial killers. Today's case takes place in Indianapolis, Indiana. I will discuss the awful crimes of Herbert Baumister, also known as Herbert the Pervert. This is his story. Alright, so Herbert Baumister, who is this absolute freak? Well, he was born on April 7th, 1947 in Indianapolis, Indiana. His father was an anesthesiologist named Herbert Eugene Baumeister, and his mother was called Elizabeth. The couple had Herbert in 1947, Barbara in 1948, Brad in 1954, and Richard in 1956. The family was well respected in the community. Herbert had a seemingly normal childhood. He played tag and wiffle ball with the neighborhood kids, so normal kid activities. His friends began getting into sports, but Herb was not very athletic and did not really care for sports. They quit playing with Herb, as he showed more nerdy, goofy behaviors, but they would play basketball and baseball with his sister Barbara. Soon after, he began to exhibit strange behaviors. He stuck to rituals. For example, at 5 p.m., he would watch cartoons while eating a peanut butter sandwich with carrots. All I can think is that he did not eat dinner with his family. No way I would allow this, as I believe dinner is as a family, but to each their own, I guess. Buckle up, Buttercup, because here we're going to go straight into his creepy behavior. He is believed to have urophilia, or arousal from urination. Friends remembered that he wondered what urine tasted like. He soon developed a weird obsession with dead animals. He's very public about his obsession, by the way. Of course, this is weird of him, so school wasn't easy for him, and he kind of brought it on himself. Then instead of looking at himself and thinking he should perhaps leave dead animals alone, he doubles down on his obsession. He takes revenge on his peers with their disgust with his new hobby by leaving them on his classmate's desk. He also put a dead crow on his teacher's desk. He even urinated all over his teacher's desk. I need you to know that at this point he is doing this. He is not like 7 years old. Not that that would be any better, but you might be able to say, well, maybe it's a weird little kid thing. He was actually attending North Central High School at this point. Not sure on the exact age, but he was between 14 and 17 in high school, so he knew better. Teachers were concerned about Herb and called his parents. They became aware of his odd behavior and took him to see a psychiatrist. They took him to different institutions to get a read on what was going on with him. One of the doctors that saw him diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia and antisocial personality disorder. You think this meant he was getting help, but there really wasn't a follow-up with him. While it seemed like his parents tried to help, his dad, Herb Sr., was kind of a dick to him. He was mild-mannered to everyone else, including his siblings, but he would call Herb stupid and smack him on the butt or the head. And this was in public, so Lord only knows what he was doing in private. Herb's behavior seemed to have improved. His reputation was known, so he was kind of ostracized from social circles. In 1965, after graduating from high school, he attended Indiana University. However, he was unsuccessful and dropped out after one semester. His parents got on him about his future. They felt as if he was not going to school, he needed to find a job, which is fair. Unlike Herbert, his father had a good reputation and had connections. He got his son a job as a copier at the Indianapolis Star. He was said to be a very hard worker and well-liked. He was described as eccentric, but not with too many red flags at this point, like he did before. He did own a hearse. I'm sure you know what this is, but it's a funeral car in case you don't. I have heard people buying these because you can get them cheaper. I personally would not because, it has a lot of history of dead bodies and stuff like that, but to each their own, I guess. He did attempt to try again in 1967, but was ultimately left again before finishing his semester. Although he was not successful in his second attempt at college, he did meet a woman named Juliana Saiter, or Julie, as she preferred. Julie was a former high school journalism teacher. They met while attending the University of Indiana's Young Republicans Club. Julie later said of him that he seemed eccentric, but harmless. Boy, was she mistaken. She looked over these red flags because they had a lot in common, such as an interest in car, conservative views, and a desire to own their own businesses. Unlike Herb, Julie was social, well-liked, and an extrovert. She had many friends in high school and a very good reputation. We know Herb's reputation was awful, playing with dead animals and urinating on desks and stuff like that. On November 21st, 1971, the couple married. On the outside, they looked like a happy and ideal couple. Despite this image they displayed, things were not ideal. About 6 months into their marriage, his mental health declined again. He became depressed and erratic. His father committed him to a psychiatric facility. I'm not really sure why his father committed him and not Julie, since it was his wife. Maybe it's the time period. I'm sure it was harder for women to commit husbands than it was for men to commit their wives. But Herb Sr. also had connections, so probably able to pull some strings. Julie said of his mental health at the time, quote, "He was hurting, and he really needed help," unquote. He was released after 2 months in 1972. He showed the doctors he could resume his normal life. Great, guess things are up from here. Well, we wouldn't be here if he was actually better. He could not keep a job and would go from one job to another, similar to his school life. Speaking of college, the same year, Herb tried college again. This time, Butler University. He dropped out after another semester. Julie later said that they had a real lack of intimacy. In the 25 years that they were married, they had intercourse 5 or 6 times. She had never even seen him completely naked. Despite them rarely being intimate, they went on to have 3 children. Marnie, Eric, and Emily. It is believed that he was struggling with his sexuality, and that was part of his hospital stay, was because his dad did not want to acknowledge the fact that his son was gay. This makes sense as the lack of sex with Julie, but also his victim type and the crimes that he later committed. He began working at the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles, or BMW, different from the car company, while Julie was teaching English and journalism at Broad Ripple High School, but she recently decided to retire to be a full-time mother. At first, Herb was well-liked by his coworkers, again because of his work ethic. Then he was bossy and aggressive. He would often brag about his privileged lifestyle when growing up. He wore nice suits. He showcased a dark sense of humor, which was uncommon in the 1970s, catching his coworkers off guard. They shrugged this off until one Christmas. At one point, he sent them a Christmas card with him and another man in drag. Today, this would be mostly accepted and might even thought of nothing weird, but then again, this is the 70s. This was also a conservative work environment. I guess he thought they would see it as mockery, but they were more disgusted, which is a whole nother topic. Despite his reputation with his coworkers, he was promoted to head of financial operations. In September 1985, Herbert skipped work with some coworkers he was friendly with. They went out to get drunk in the middle of the workday. This included some underage workers. He drove his employee's car drunk, crashed it into a parked car. He did not want to get caught, so Herbert told the coworker they were going to flee, and they went along with it. Herbert asked for the keys, and the coworker thought maybe Herbert would fix the car, but 3 days later, he still hadn't gotten it back. When he asked Herb about this, Herb said the car had disappeared, and he did not know where it went. He ended up reporting it stolen, and in 1986, Herb was arrested for conspiracy to commit theft. He told Julie that someone at work was jealous and trying to get revenge on him for his promotion. She believed this bullshit. I think she just really wanted to think the best of him, and it was not socially acceptable to divorce anyways, so she was kind of stuck. He was found not guilty, though. It was discovered that someone had urinated on the manager's desk. I wonder who that could have been. This caught up to him when he sent Robert Orr, the Indiana governor at the time, a letter that he urinated on, so they assumed Herbert was the one who had urinated on the desk. He was fired soon after this. He told Julie that he just wanted to move on to different opportunities. Julie did not want to return to teaching, so they were living off of their savings. Herbert appeared to be a good father, but when Julie was volunteering or doing errands and the kids were at school, he would do his own thing. This would include day drinking. He seemed to have a drinking problem as he was arrested for a hit and run while drunk in 1985. This charge was also dropped. There's no doubt this led him to think he could get away with anything, even murder. After losing his job, Herb began to go to gay bars and clubs. He had this double life because he could not be openly gay at this time. He engaged in sex with men while Julie was at home. Yep, that's right, he cheated on his wife. Soon his double life would make Herb's demeanor unpredictable. Neighbors said they noticed this. Sometimes he was very friendly, giving away free magazines and concert tickets to the neighborhood kids, then becoming irate at small things. Herb began to work at a thrift store. He enjoyed this a lot. Herb and Julie actually looked into what it'd be like to open a business. Herbert really wanted to open up his own chain of upscale thrift stores. They worked on this for the next 3 years. Herbert would shop garage sales, estate sales, dumpster diving, etc., specifically in nicer, wealthier areas. Around this time, Herb Sr. passed away. Herb cleaned out his things and found his father's prescription pad. He stole this and began to write prescriptions for diet pills. He was obsessed with being thin and how he looked. I do not know how he could be obsessed with his looks when he looks the way he does, but okay. In 1988, Herb borrowed $350,000 from his mother and opened a thrift store called Sav-A-Lot, not to be confused with the Sav-A-Lot discount grocery stores. He opened his store in 1989. He put a lot into his business, keeping it organized and stocked with higher quality items than other thrift stores. Sounds like a good place if it was not owned by a complete freak. The business was doing well, so Herbert decided to expand it. He had at least one other location, but some sources say he had 2 other. Either way, this boosted his ego and gave him a lifestyle upgrade. But this would be short-lived as the business eventually slowed, leading to financial issues. This was due to tax issues and money management, or lack thereof. This began to cause issues in his marriage with Julie. They were stressing out and arguing a lot. Herbert really got mean towards Julie. She would take the kids to his mother's condo on the weekend. Herb would stay back at home to deal with everything alone. After a few months of not seeing each other much, they decided to get a divorce. This did not last very long, and they decided to reconcile. He needed her for his image, and who else would put up with his crap? He was really trying to save the business and go on what he said were business trips in Ohio. Around this time, gay men were being found along I-70 between Indianapolis and Ohio. Murdered. They were last seen in the company of a man at gay bars. In close proximity, they were found either partially or fully naked, dumped in rivers, streams, and ditches, and strangled to death. The men who were found were named Michael Sean Petrie, Maurice Ellen Taylor, Delvoyd Lee Baker, Michael Andrew Riley, Eric Allen Rucker, Michael Allen Glenn, James Boyd Robbins, Stephen Lynn Elliott, Clay Russell Boatman, Thomas Ray Clevenger, and Otto. Technically, these are all unsolved, but authorities believe Herb committed these murders. We'll get into that later. The bodies quit showing up along I-70 in 1991 when he moved into a new property. I'm actually going to cover the I-70 murders in my next video. I just wanted to give them their own video. In November 1991, the couple bought a property in Westfield, north of Indianapolis. It was a huge 18-acre farm that Herb named Fox Hollow Farm. It included an elegant style mansion with stained glass windows, fireplaces, and an indoor swimming pool, which will come into play later in this case. The property was 11,000 square feet and worth $1 million. The end of the murdered men along I-70 actually links up to when the couple bought the farm. Herb did not really have the money to comfortably purchase this, but he wanted everyone to think they were a successful, wealthy family. They were seen as the American dream, a happy couple with 3 children, upper class, and a successful business. This image of the family would soon be shattered. Herb was living a double life. One as a family man, and another in which he was secretly meeting men to hook up with. There's nothing wrong with him being gay. It's that he was cheating on his wife, and then what he ended up doing to these men is horrendous. The line between these 2 lives would soon to blur. His business was starting to lose a lot of money. He became erratic at work, and employees later said that they never knew what mood he'd be on. It was difficult to be around people like that, like you're always walking on eggshells. By 1994, the Sav-A-Lot company was failing due to its inability to replicate its success with the new location. He was even being sued by vendors for unpaid bills. On top of all of this, his marriage was really taking a hit. Julie was also noticing that his mood swings were getting worse. Also at night, when his family went out of town, Herb would spend time at gay bars, going by the name Brian Smart. Around 1993, young men started to disappear, never to be seen again. These disappearances were excused as runaways, or they just died of HIV. Then where are the bodies? On August 6th, 1993, Alan Livingston went missing. He was described as a loving and caring man. He was last seen entering a vehicle in Indianapolis. He called his mother every weekend, so when he never called, Sharon knew something was wrong. She filed a missing persons case. The police said that they would contact her within the next few months, but she never heard from them. She believed this was because he was gay and very open about it. A retired Marion County sheriff named Virgil Vandegrift was now a private investigator. In June 1994, he was contacted by Mary Beasley. Her 28-year-old son, Ellen Broussard, was missing. He was a nursing student at an AIDS hospital. He was described as bubbly, happy, and great with his patients. He was HIV positive himself, so I'm sure that made him sympathetic to his patients. He was close to his mother, and they would speak at least once a week. On June 6th, 1994, he was last seen at a gay bar called Brothers. His schedule was very unpredictable, as by day he was a nurse, and by night he would party at the clubs. Mary was worried, as one might suspect, but especially because she had 2 other sons, and one was already killed in a car accident earlier that year. She had already spoken to another PI and a psychic before calling Virgil. She said that Ellen had a drinking problem. She bought him a car, but he got 2 DUIs, and she had to take it away from him. He was angry with her, but since then they have been on good terms. Virgil was able to confirm that he was a heavy drinker and a regular at gay bars in Indianapolis. He was a stripper at a club called the Unicorn, but his drinking problem got him fired. A coworker at the hospital said that Ellen began to do sex work in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. This is when Virgil finds out about another disappearance. In July 1993, a 31-year-old named Jeff Jones was last seen by his family. A year or so before his disappearance, they dropped him off at the Salvation Army's detox center in Indianapolis. He decided to ditch rehab and ran into a friend the following morning. Then he disappeared, never to be seen again. Virgil compared Jeff with Alan and realized they had a lot in common. Like they were heavy drinkers and frequented the gay nightlife scene, they also had similar features. A week or 2 after looking into Jeff's case, Virgil was then contacted by Catherine Arejo. She said that her 33-year-old son, named Roger Allen Goodlet, was missing. His friends called him Allen, but I'm just going to call him Goodlet since there's a couple Allens in the story and it's just going to get confusing. Goodlet was born on July 30th, 1960. He lived with his mother Catherine and her husband Henry. Catherine split up with his father when he was 3 months old. He was the youngest of 3 children, with a brother named Junior and a sister named Cynthia. When he was born, his brain was bruised during his delivery, resulting in brain damage. This made life a challenge for him. He did not talk until he was 4. Despite this obstacle, he was good at drawing and making maps. He would enjoy driving around the new subdivisions in their neighborhood with Catherine, then recreate a perfect drawing of the neighborhood on paper. Catherine ran a salon out of her home so she could make money and be a constant for her son. He graduated from Cardinal Ritter High School despite not earning required grades because the teachers really liked him and knew he had tried. He was such a young man, described as the kind of guy who would give someone the shirt off his back. Since graduating, he worked different part-time jobs. He attempted to move out on his own, but did better with Catherine, so he moved back. He relied on public transportation as he did not drive, but he wanted to be as independent as possible. On July 21st, Catherine gifted him a brand new outfit: jorts, a hooded shirt with green, gold, and white stripes, and a pair of black boots. This was 9 days before his 34th birthday. Later that afternoon, his friend Jeff kept calling Goodlet for help moving an appliance. He did not want to help, so he told his mother to say he was not home. She suggests that he just help him and get it over with. He left the house around 3 p.m. to go to Jeff's. Catherine only saw Jeff pick him up and drop him off. She never actually met him. This was normal as he did not really bring his friends around. They stopped at our place, a leather bar. Catherine was not aware of his sexuality or that he was curious. He never shared this with her. His drinking was not really a problem until recently, and Catherine thinks it helped him relax and socialize. He did rack up quite a record of arrests, ranging from solicitation to public intoxication. He would usually just get released and driven back home to Catherine's because of his disability. In total, he spent maybe a week in jail. The day after he met up with Jeff on July 22nd, he never made it home, which was not normal for him, so of course Catherine was worried. She called Jeff, who said that he had left the bar to give someone else a ride home. Goodlet actually stayed at the bar. Catherine then called Rick, another one of his friends, who would take care of him and give him a place to sleep while he sobers up after they go out drinking. Rick told Catherine he never went out drinking that night. Catherine called the bar, who passed along a detective's information named Mary Wilson. She was an ally to the gay community. She wanted to help, but the department policy wouldn't allow it for 30 days, which is insane. By the time you investigate, leads are cold. Well, she met with her old sorority every month and confided in them about her missing son and how worried she was. So one of these sorority sisters, named Shirley, her brother was the PI Virgil. This is when she contacted Virgil to help her son. Virgil immediately handed out missing person flyers. He went to local gay bars to see if anyone had seen Goodlet. This is when he learned that he had been seen entering a blue vehicle with an Ohio license plate. Looking at similarities between the two men, Virgil was worried that Indianapolis had a serial killer who targeted gay men in the area. Unfortunately, the gay men were reluctant to speak to him due to the distrust of the police. I mean, they were subjected to raids, or whenever they reported a crime, they were ignored, harassed, so I don't even blame them at this point. A few weeks later, after learning about Goodlet's disappearance, Virgil received a call from a man. He was given the name Tony Harris to protect him in the media. Well, Tony tells Virgil that he is sure he had a weird night with a person he thinks is responsible for Goodlet's disappearance. They knew each other in passing and were friendly acquaintances. He was actually trying to find out information regarding his disappearance. He was very outgoing and would often go to gay clubs. In August 1994, he visited the 501 Tavern, where he noticed a man who was too into Goodlet's missing person poster. He recognized the man from the gay bar scene. He also remembered seeing him with his friend. He decided to see if he knew anything. He described this man as having full pouty lips, delicate eyes, whatever that means, and leather-like wrinkly skin, possibly from too much tanning. He wore conservative business clothing, but was wrinkled. He also said he was on the shorter side. But Tony was 6'7" tall and in great shape, so of course, most people would look small next to him. When asked about Goodlet, the man just ignored the question. He introduced himself as Brian Smart and claimed he was 28, which Tony did not really believe as he looked older. He also said that he was a landscaper. Later on, Brian invited Tony over to swim at his home that he was house sitting for, while the owners were preparing to move into it. He was doing the landscaping and staying to complete the project. Tony accepted the offer as he did not feel intimidated by Brian's small stature. He also wanted to find out if he knew more about his friend's disappearance. Brian proposed that they leave in their respective cars, so when Tony wanted to leave, he could. For some reason, Tony thought this was weird. At first I was like, don't you want to leave in a vehicle in case you need to make a getaway? But then I thought if he left in his car and somebody hurt him and he left it at the bar, it would be like a red flag. And then hopefully it would get investigated. So they left in Brian's car and Brian offered Tony a drink out of his flask, but he refused. He said that Brian got a little irritated, but then it passed. So they drive through this area with horses and mansions, and they get to a mansion with farm in the name. There was like 4 or 5 other cars in the driveway, one with Ohio license plate. They walked through the side door of the mansion. While walking through, he noticed a bunch of furniture and boxes and cobwebs. He said that it was creepy because the lights were off, and Brian said that the owner had not turned the electricity on yet. They headed to the basement to get to the indoor pool. There was a bar area, but he noticed that the pool area was very odd. There was a big screen TV unplugged behind older cushions from a fold-out bed, all disorderly. The most creepy part of this area was around the pool, where there were several mannequins. Tony was like, what's up with these mannequins? And Brian said he got lonely, so he set them up to feel less lonely, which is kind of pathetic, but Tony thought this was weird because he said he was only staying for a few weeks. So how could he be lonely if this was just a temporary spot? Brian then asked Tony if he did cocaine, to which he said no, but he smoked pot. He took out a joint and they smoked together. He offered Tony a clear drink. He pretended to drink it, but at some point he went to the bathroom, dumped it out, and replaced it with water. Then he went back in the pool area. He drank the water, acting if it was the drink. Brian offered another drink, and when Tony refused, he started to get angry again. Brian then excused himself for a few minutes, and when he returned, he was very hyper. Tony thought maybe he had done some cocaine. He told Tony that he was gay, but it would destroy his family if they found out. He then told Tony to check out the heated pool and said that he could swim. So Tony took off his shirt and got in the pool. Brian continues talking, just looks at Tony on the side of the pool. He starts talking about erotic asphyxiation. He comes up and disappears again. He returns with a pool hose and replaces it around Tony's neck. He then asks Tony if he would like to try it, and Tony loses it. He calls him a pervert, starts hitting him and throwing him into the pool. He then accused him of killing Goodlet. Brian sank into the pool and came back up coughing, but looked ecstatic. He told Tony all he had to do was say no. He did not need to let him drown. But then he started talking about how he knew tricks for blocking off the carotid artery. He said it turned him on to watch his partner's face change color. He kept talking, going from topic to top. Brian then pulled out the sofa bed and got undressed. He then begged Tony to choke him while touching himself. He agreed, thinking it was his only way out. He felt as if Brian was happy, maybe he could get out of this alive. He also really wanted to get answers about Goodlet. Tony put Brian's hands on his neck and started to touch himself. He wanted to make him believe that he was into it. Brian's grasp got tighter, so he faked as if he passed out, and when he opened his eyes, Brian looked scared. He acted like he was concerned for Tony, saying, "You could have died. People have accidents." Tony took this opportunity to ask about Goodlet. Then Brian accuses him for being there before and says that he knew too much. They have a bit of a back and forth. This is when Brian comes down, presumably on cocaine. His speech slowed until he passed out during his chaotic conversation in which he accused Tony of knowing the truth. He waited until he knew for sure Brian was out. Then he began to search for any evidence of who Brian was or what he had done to Goodlet. He could not find anything though, so he decided to call his sister Tammy to get him out of there. Unfortunately, he was not sure where he was, just the general area. But he figured if he did not get out alive, at least his sister had something to go on. Early that morning, Brian awoke and said that he needed to grab papers and run errands. He told Tony that he could stay and sleep or whatever, but Tony took this opportunity to search the entire house uninterrupted. He noticed that there was little furniture but a fully decorated Christmas tree. The kitchen looked like the most used part of the mansion. He headed upstairs and sees a bedroom with a set of twin beds, but in the closet was recording equipment. He thought maybe he was just a weird filmmaker. There was a room that had women clothes. He just got extremely weird vibes. Shortly when Brian returned and Tony asked to be dropped off at the tavern to get his car, Brian acted like he was asking him for a kidney, but still took him the 30 minutes to get to his car. He acted like he wanted to see Brian again. He was convinced that whatever happened to Roger was caused by this Brian guy. He wanted to warn people, but he knew he did not have any actual proof. He asked to see him the following Wednesday, and Brian gave Tony his number, which was an Ohio area code. 2 days before they were meant to meet up, Tony contacted Virgil. He said that the Indianapolis and FBI basically said that they thought he was lying. This is because he seemed like he was rambling and could not remember some details, but was not sure if Brian Smart was his real name. He then told Virgil that Brian was completely hairless on his chest, arms, and legs. Virgil believed him and agreed to follow him to the meetup. However, Brian never showed up and never answered Tony's calls. Despite the lack of details and a location, Virgil continued the investigation. He worked on finding out who this Brian Smart dude may be. This is when he found out about the murder investigations of the I-70 murders in Ohio. We discussed this, but they were all gay men, or presumed to be gay, along I-70. They were found near water, strangled with a rope, or another type of ligature. The detective working on these murders were Preble County investigator David Lindelof. Similar to Virgil, had a hard time getting the gay community to trust him. David suggested Virgil talk to a journalist named Josh Thomas, who was a gay man. Josh told Virgil that these murders happened so often and nothing was getting done, so they accepted it as a risk of being part of the community. The police did not have much concern for the gay community. This is also what happened with Dahmer's victims. It is a pattern that should have never happened. Virgil decided to speak with the Indianapolis police. He was a little anxious about this as they dismissed Tony, luckily, he knew a detective named Mary Wilson. In August 1994, he called up Mary. At this time, she was looking into the disappearance of Jeff Jones. She listened to Virgil and asked for David Landeloff's contact information. Mary was feeling very close to these disappearances and wanted to solve the cases. She was actually investigating the disappearance of another man called Richard Hamilton, who disappeared on July 1993. Richard Hamilton was the middle child of 3 children. His parents were Dealey Collins, Mika, and Richard Hamilton Sr. Dealey was a truck driver. She actually raised Richard alone as his dad kind of dipped out of his life. His sister Judy said that he was a good kid who would help out neighbors with lawn work. He dropped out of high school and worked fast food jobs to make money. Judy did say he could have a temper, but most of the time he would storm off and cool off. After he comes back, he'll be fine. It was just normal for him to leave Indianapolis on a whim, but he always called his mom to let her know where he was and that he was safe. He was living between his mother's home and a different sister's home. They realized that something was off when he was a no-show for Thanksgiving and Christmas. They were adamant that he would be home for the holidays, or at the very least that he would have called family. The disappearance is how the family found out that he was in the LGBTQ community. His sister Judy said that she never met his friends or anything, but he brought girls, and there were even rumors that he had fathered a child. She was surprised to find out that he was either gay or maybe bisexual, but he could have been closeted. A lot of people would marry and have families to hide their sexuality. Mary told Virgil that she was actually not officially on Richard's case because there was now a warrant for his arrest. Before disappearing, arrested for solicitation of sex work, but disappeared and missed his court date. His missing persons case was now an active warrant. All the authorities thought he was just on the run, but Mary had a gut feeling that that was not the case. She was investigating secretly. She met with Tony to drive him through the neighborhoods to see if anything looked familiar, but they could not find Brian's home. Fast forward a year, in August 1995, Mary received a call from Tony. He said he was at the bar with some friends. This is when he saw Brian. He got his license plate number. She rang his plate, and it was no other than Herbert Baumister. Herbert had an ex-employee named Brian Smart, so this is where he got the name. She looked into Herb's life and was sure that he was responsible for these disappearances. She believed that he was a serial killer, and Tony was lucky to escape the way he did. She would visit the Sav-A-Lot store for months before confronting Herb about her accusations. She asked to search his property. He denied the crimes, of course, would not let her search his property. He told Mary that if she needs to talk to him, she can contact his attorney. On November 30th, Mary went to Julie, Herb's wife, and attempted to explain what they believed he had done. Julie basically said that she had heard of her and that she was harassing her husband. She assumed that this had to do with the theft of the ex-employee's car, but Mary said this had nothing to do with that. She told Julie about the missing gay men and that he was seen cruising gay bars and seen with some of the missing men. Julie denied this and refused to allow them to search the property. Julie was in complete denial and was so gullible. She thought he was being set up by former employees and had no ties to the gay community. Mary attempted to obtain a search warrant, but there was insufficient evidence. 6 months later, the couple was struggling. Herbert had an emotional and mental breakdown. Julie was about done with the rocky marriage. The Children's Bureau canceled the contracts with the Sav-A-Lot stores. The couple was looking at bankruptcy. In 1996, Julie filed for divorce, citing Herbert's emotional instability. Julie was not going to go through with this, but thought it might get his attention. Herbert moved back in, but was volatile at work and began to drink on the job. Soon he just stopped showing up at stores. Julie accepted the dissolution of her marriage at this point. They were not communicating at all. This is when Julie began to question Herbert's lies. On June 24th, 1996, Julie's lawyer contacted Mary to allow them to search the property. I think she thought that if they searched, this would be over, but maybe deep inside, she knew he was guilty. They also told Mary about discovery their son made. 2 years previously, Herbert Baumister, the couple's son, found a full adult skeleton. Eric was 13 at the time and playing in the wooded area with his friend Kevin. They found a skull, which they placed on a stick and returned home. Eric actually wanted to scare his sister Emily with it. Julie saw them first and was horrified. They showed her this area, and she found a whole skeleton. When she later asked Herbert about this, he said it was for his father's research. Remember, his father was an anesthesiologist? He said that he found it in his father's things after he died. And decided to bury it. Dumb Julie believed this, of course, hook, line, and sinker. A few days later, Julie went to the spot, and the bones were gone. She never asked Herbert about it. That same day, authorities searched Fox Hollow Farm. Meanwhile, Herbert was at Lake Wawasee with Eric at Herb's mother's condo. So he had no idea this was happening. The investigators get to the patio, where there is concrete and pebbles. In the pebbles, there were bone fragments. To make this creepier, his kids played in this area for years. They conducted a full excavation the following week, then extended to a neighbor's property. They found about 5,000 bone fragments, including a fractured hyoid bone, which is above your voice box, so the person was strangled. The bones closer to the neighbors were larger, such as ribs and vertebrae. They estimated the bones to equal approximately 11 people. This is when Julie finally grasps the situation and is freaking out because Herb has their son. I understand. Who knows what he'll do when he finds out he is caught. Herb was served with papers to hand Eric over to the authorities. He immediately gave Eric over to the police. He thought this was just a game that Julie was playing, not that he was caught. Despite the bones they found, Herbert was not arrested. I guess they wanted more evidence. But what more evidence do you need than 11 bodies found on a property? Soon after getting Eric and leaving Herbert at his mother's home, the story began to break. On July 3rd, 1996, at Pinery Provincial Park in Saiter, Ontario, Canada, Herb's body was found. He had a self-inflicted bullet hole in his forehead using a .557 Mac. His 1989 Buick Century was found at the park. Then he walked to the beach and ended his life. The bullet exited out the back of his head. He was wearing gray pants, a white dress shirt, and red and blue striped tie. They found a 3-page note he wrote about his business going bankrupt and his marriage. He blamed Julie. He never mentioned the grisly discovery at Fox Hollow Farm or the murders and disappearances. It was found in his car in an envelope with the words, "Attention" on the front. He ended the note saying he was going to eat a peanut butter sandwich as he did when he was a kid, then go to sleep. In May 1997, police received a tip from a man who said he had been picked up by Herb downtown Indianapolis in 1994. He saw a man named Steve, who he recognized from the gay bar scene, in the back seat. They all went to Herbert's home. Herb had sex with Steve while the informant watched, enjoying a drink. He felt like he was drugged, but Herbert drove the two men back. Steve was sleeping in the back seat. The informant never saw Steve again. That summer, Julie found items that she did not recognize. One of these was an Indiana driver's license. The items ended up belonging to Roger and Steve. In 1998, investigators concluded that Herbert was also the I-70 Strangler. They asked for information on these murders, as Herbert was the only suspect, but they wanted to close the case so it hasn't been proven that Herbert committed it. It's just a bunch of coincidences. So I'm going to talk about Julie for a second. She's kind of a dumb bitch, honestly. She blamed the gay community for her husband's sexuality. She said that she found out about the depravity in the gay community and could not believe what they did to Herbert. What they did to Herbert, not what he did to the gay community, but people in the gay community as a whole are cassetting adults. Herbert was a sick freak who murdered people because he did not want to come out and was jealous of the people who were unapologetically themselves. There was also a Hulu documentary called Return to Fox Hollow, New Victims, Darker Secrets. I have to mention this because Tony Harris was on it. He confessed to not telling the full truth. Apparently, he witnessed suspicious things, like Herb burning them in a fire pit, and a lot of speculation about, like, maybe he was the real killer and blackmailed Herb and possibly murdered Herb because of the tapes being missing. The others that he could be an accomplice. I find these hard to believe, but I'm open to other opinions and will keep an open mind. Also, he did announce his real name, which was Mark Goodyear. Herb was such an absolute freak. This was a heavy one as I have a close relationship with the gay community for so long. Gay bars and clubs were places that community felt to be themselves. Not only were they targeted and murdered, but the police showed no care for the community and dismissed it as a death. Marie and Virgil were the only ones that did a good job. This would most likely have never have been solved if it was not for Tony Harris, even though his is a little, controversial. But he cared so much for his friend that he literally risked his life to get answers and was dismissed as well. But I'm going to bring it back to the victims. There were 10 confirmed. Daniel Thomas Halloran, Roger Allen Goodlet, Alan Livingston, Manuel Resenditz, Jeffrey Jones, Johnny Bayer, Richard Hamilton, Steve Hell, Alan Broussard, and Mike. Thank you for learning about the victims with me today. I want to know your opinion, but please be respectful. If you're a judgmental dick, you'll be removed and blocked. comment, subscribe, and like. If you have any future cases you would like me to cover, please request one using the form in the description box. So my next video, usually I do Missing Monday, but I'm just going to do the part 2 to this, which will be on the I-70 Strangler. So we'll look at different suspects and the different victims and just the theories. But I will see you tomorrow for part 2. Stay curious, cautious, and safe. Okay, bye.